You're watching Breakthrough News.
I'm Charlotte Hohenstein, and you're watching Breakthrough News on BTR Today. On today's show, we're talking about the experience of adoption for birth mothers as well as prospective parents, and how society's idea of this process has changed. With me in the studio is Jennifer Bliss of Independent Adoption Center, IAC, one of America's largest and oldest adoption agencies. Jennifer, you're the National Associate Counseling Director. How has the idea of adoption changed over the years?
The idea of adoption has changed drastically over the years. It used to be something that was shrouded in secrecy, mainly because it was in everybody's best interest at a society level. So a woman who gave birth out of wedlock would possibly not be considered a marriage material because of that, or a child who was born to unmarried parents would be considered a bastard, or something that would be follow him around in a very negative way. So it was secret not because psychologically that was the healthiest, but really because society made it a unfortunate necessity. And over time, obviously, those ideas have shifted, and it's okay right now to be born of a relationship out of wedlock, or
it almost sounds like archaic saying
it is,
that,
right?
Like out of wedlock. Yeah,
it is, for a good reason, hopefully. And so right now we can pull back the shroud, and adoption doesn't have to be a secret anymore. Adoption, even language of adoption has changed. So people used to say, oh, she got put up for adoption. And that language came from back in the day in the 1800s, early 1900s, when children who were orphans were actually lifted up onto the train and sent to farm communities across the United States, and people who needed extra farm hands came and picked children off the train. So Those orphan trains is an example of where that language comes from. And we don't use that language anymore. Just like we don't say that she gave up her child for adoption, because people give up negative things. You give up drinking, you give up gambling, you don't give up your child. These days we say things like place, because that's the accurate reflection of actually what's happening. Women make a plan and specifically place their children in homes that they choose. And so language is powerful. I think we have to remember that as we talk about adoption and other things where language continues to develop people's views on the world.
And also the mother is still staying the birth mother, I should say, is staying in the child's life to varying degrees, right? I mean, she still gets to see her child, whereas before, they would seal the identity of the child. I don't know if that's the right term. And IAC has always had a policy of open adoption, which specifically means what?
Well, in 1982, when we opened, this was very controversial. But what open adoption actually means is where a woman who's making an adoption plan is doing it voluntarily, and she's choosing the family in which her child should be placed. Additionally, she doesn't walk away forever. She's not parenting the child, and it's not co-parenting, but she remains a relative in the child's life of an extended form. So the child grows up knowing, Julie grew me in her belly, and she chose my parents for me. The child calls her Julie. She's not a third parent. She's someone the child sees maybe once or twice a year and knows that they can call and ask her questions if she comes home one day from school and has a question about something. It's just not a secret anymore. It takes the power of it to make it a big thing where a child has to ruminate and wonder about these unknown concepts. Children need something tangible for them to relate to. Otherwise, they're going to fill in these gaps with their imagination. It's a lot more drastic and scary than the actual truth.
Because there have been several studies, right, done on the benefits of open adoption for all parties involved, and it does seem to be pretty categorically positive, at least neutral, and usually positive in terms of the child's development, the relationship with the parents.
That's exactly the case. And there's actually benefits for all three members of the triad when we're looking at openness over time.
And triad means the child,
adoptive parents, and the birth parents.
Right.
So, for example, with children, you have children growing up much more confident of the way that they became a family, of who they are and where they came from. You know, the idea of secrecy comes along with its shame. And people keep secrets for something that's bad or negative. And in open adoption, you can teach a child to be proud of who they are. And that's not something negative about them. In addition, if a child grows up feeling that they're not allowed to know who their birth parent is, they also understand that their parents are trying to protect them from things, and that's their parents' role. So if they're not allowed to know who their birth parent is, there's an assumption that maybe something's wrong with them or bad about them that they need to be protected from. And once they connect the fact that this is who they came from, we run the risk of children thinking, oh my gosh, what bad could I have inherited? And we need to pull that misnomer away. And children need to see that their parents are proud of who their birth parents are. And then they can internalize that as they should be proud of who they are too. For adoptive parents, this was surprising. What came out of the longitudinal study was parents in an adoptive open relationship are actually more confident in their role as the real parents.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Than parents in closed adoption. And I think also we can relate that to the idea that things that are conceptual are scary and oftentimes have more power over someone than what the tangible truth is. So an adoptive parent in a closed relationship might be wondering, I wonder how the birth mother feels about the adoption. Does she regret it? Is she pondering it? Is she trying to search us out? What if she's hiding behind the bush at Little League? Right? These are very real
very
fears.
Understandable, right? Yeah.
Alternatively, Jessica lives in St. Louis, and we see her for a long weekend once a year, and she's just got a new job, and she's dating this new guy, and she's excited to tell us about it when she comes in next month. A lot less scary.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, actually. What are the main challenges of going through the adoption process? Because I'm sure for anyone who has never experienced this, it's just shrouded in question marks.
Absolutely. And you're talking about the adoptive parents.
Yeah, I mean, and the birth mother,
okay.
but let's start with the adoptive parents.
The adoptive parents, I would say the hardest time is the wait.
And there is a wait.
Yeah. You do all this time to get approved, all this stuff to get approved, and then you're approved, and you just have to wait to get chosen by a birth mom. And as we all know, waiting that is an infinite amount of time that you don't know when the waiting's going to end seems a lot longer than you know specifically how long you have to wait. And in this scenario, we don't know what your journey's going to be. You may wait 2 weeks. You may unfortunately wait 2 years, although I hope that that really happens, but it does happen.
And the average is 15 months.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And we don't know what everybody's journey is going to be. And usually, especially if a couple has gone through a lot of infertility before they reach our door, they're feeling so emotionally exasperated already. And now we're asking them to start a whole new process. So it's not an easy journey, but the rewards are vast and great and completely worth it.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously I can't literally imagine, but it's sort of easier to immediately think about the conflict that the birth mother's going through in thinking about whether or not to place a child for adoption. Right. But the other side of the coin is also extremely fraught. I'm sure the emotional stakes are just so high. And the whole process, right, is matching the birth mother, really. Right. It's really matching the birth mother because you deal with people who have not given birth yet, right?
Correct.
And the parents. So it's actually matching the birth mother and the prospective parents. Is it obvious when families, when they match?
Whether it's the right match?
Yeah, whether it's the right match.
Well, it is a mutual selection process. So while the birth mother is the one to reach out to the handful of families that she's interested in, it's important that the relationship is in sync both ways. That the adoptive parents see this birth mother, potential birth mother, who they're getting to know as someone that they genuinely like and would look forward to seeing in the future, and vice versa. And it's something that can't be forced. I often relate it similarly to the dating process, in that it doesn't matter what's down on paper. Either you feel it or you don't. And the connection needs to be genuine and authentic. And it almost feels like chemistry when it's right. And this is the person who you're meant to be matched with, is how both parties wind up feeling when it's the right match.
And people consistently do find that connection with someone. Because I feel like the stakes are so high. I would just be so worried about matching with the wrong person. But you're saying that people feel it and they just know
when it's the right match.
When it's right. Wow. Well, we're going to have to take a brief break with an excerpt from this week's episode of Serious Business featuring Beach Creeps. We'll be right back in a moment. We are back with our discussion on adoption. Jennifer, what happens if someone, say the birth mother, changes her mind about this whole process? Does that happen a lot?
It happens. It happens sometimes during the match, and a lot of that's the result of counseling that our counselors do with birth parents, because we do want to sort out with them whether or not this is the right decision. And if they realize they're not going to be able to go through with it during the match, although it's disappointing, it's better than a devastated situation where adoptive parents at the hospital realize they're not going to be able to take that baby home. So, and also when people ask, oh, how often do birth parents change their mind? I think that they're also referring to the situation where a baby goes home with the adoptive parents, and a couple days later, they get that call that they have to return the baby because the birth mother changes her mind. That scenario actually really happens less than 4% of the time.
Wow. Okay.
So listen, if it happens to you, it feels like 100% of the time. But everybody's there for you at the agency for comfort, support, counseling, and when you're ready, you go live again and you wait for that right birth mother. So again, where I say there's no process and journey I can tell you exactly what it's going to look like, but we don't give up on you, and if you don't give up on us, the ending is worth it.
Because I mean, as you say, it is a long process, and being matched with someone is not that final placement, because that's a more final situation. Because I noticed that on your website, several thousand birth mothers reach out to you in a year about potentially placing their child, and then you end up placing between 140 and 180 babies. Oh, really?
188 last year.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Well, so nearly 200, a few hundred babies every year. So it seems like the vast majority of those birth mothers do actually decide not to place their child. But it sounds like once they go through that process of counseling and the placement actually happens, they're very, very sure. So I guess that's testimony to the counseling that you guys are doing.
Right. The biggest drop-off is from the time that they first initiate contact with the agency, and then how many of those birth mothers actually match with an adoptive family. And that's the biggest drop-off. And I think that's because just having interaction with the agency, receiving paperwork in the mail, doing an intake with one of our counselors, this process becomes very real and tangible. And potential birth mothers are at that point realizing, you know what? This is not right for me. I'm not going to be able to do this. And that's okay.
I mean, yeah, it's a huge, huge decision, of course. And for prospective parents, at what point do you see parents thinking about adoption as an option?
Yeah, there's many scenarios as far as the population that walks through our door. You have people who have not found a mate, and both men and women these days, and reach a certain age where they're financially and emotionally ready to start a family and they don't want to wait for a partner. So we have that population. We have same-sex couples who may or may not have chosen to go through any infertility procedures or fertility
because IAC also is completely non-discriminatory. I should say this, non-discriminatory when it comes to sexual orientation, gender, race, religion. You guys are completely open.
Yeah, we've always been. Which
so
in 1982 was
also
extremely controversial.
Yeah, I can imagine. You were saying.
So we have same-sex couples who may or may not have had their fertility treatments before they chose to adopt. And then we have heterosexual couples, and the majority of that situation is that they've gone through many years of fertility procedures and medical intervention, and it hasn't resulted in a pregnancy that resulted in a baby. So they walk through a door oftentimes with, I'd say on average, 5 years.
And I think you've described it in a sort of shift of goals, right? Where it's no longer about passing on your DNA.
Correct.
But it's about
becoming
being parents and having a family.
And someone can really shift their focus and open their heart to adoption when that goal changes. Is our goal to get pregnant, or is our goal to be parents? And then when that shift happens, genuinely happens, they're able to turn their attention to adoption, open their heart, and be very comfortable, happy, and excited about the fact that this is the way they are meant to build their family.
So to prospective parents who are thinking about adopting a child, but on the fence, not sure, what do you say to them?
First of all, if you have a partner, discuss it with your partner. Make sure you're both on the same page and feel comfortable with that choice. You can call a counselor and talk through it. But when people are ready to adopt, they know it. There's an internal shift that happens, and they realize that this is something they can be excited about.
Well, that's all the time we have for now. Thank you very much, Jennifer Bliss. For more information, do visit www.adoptionhelp.org or phone 1-800-877-OPEN. Thank you, Jennifer, for coming to the studio today.
Thank you for having me.
That was Jennifer Bliss from Independent Adoption Centre. To continue the conversation, share your thoughts with us on Twitter at BreakThru News. We'll be right back in a moment after this quick excerpt from a special episode of Live Studio featuring car sick cars. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm Charlotte Hohenstein and you're watching BreakThru News, an independent news show for the free thinking web. We bring you a range of voices on the issues that today's generation is thinking about. Be sure to check out breakthrough.radio.com through the weekend for our continued Easy Week coverage, including our look at the latest trend of social media celebrities riding the wave of Vine. That's it for what's breaking through the news today. Tell us what's breaking through your world on Twitter at BreakThru News. I'm Charlotte Hohenstein and thank you for joining us.